All right, what's up, my brothers? In this video, I'm going to be responding to a sponsored request. The topic is on female bosses and colleagues. We're in the Spider RS. It's a cold -3 today. I should not be driving this car. It's on Cup summer tires, but it has to go to the dealer. I'll explain that in another video. But before I hop on the highway, I'm going to read you what this problem is for this gentleman. He says, it's not about romantic relationships or the sexual marketplace, although there's certainly some overlap on these topics. My question is about interacting with women in the workplace, especially female bosses and high-level colleagues in leadership roles. I've dealt with something like this before. I have worked in public education in New Jersey for 23 years. I've been a teacher, a principal, director, and superintendent. I'm currently a director of special services in a district with about 2,000 students. I've reached a point in my career where I'm not quite at retirement age yet, which is 9 years away, but definitely starting to feel burnt out. Lately, I've noticed that having female bosses is one of the root causes of my frustration. Over the years, I found that women bosses are frustrating to work with because they seem to be driven by emotions rather than logic. I've watched calmly as female bosses fly into panic mode over trivial issues, puts in brackets, matchsticks, while they ignore significant matters that need to be addressed, i.e. the towering inferno. They pass their panic on to their team members, and it hurts morale and overall effectiveness. I've had female bosses who nitpick, criticize, and scrutinize to the point of creating hysteria for an entire team, otherwise of productive people. I've heard female teachers say many, many times, I'd rather work for a male principal than a woman. They say they're exhausted with emotional baggage that female leaders bring to the table. And they're right. It's absolutely exhausting. Everything is taken personally. Small issues explode into catastrophes. Micromanagement is a norm. Everyone walks on eggshells around this female leader's fragile emotions, and the absence of actual leadership skills exist. I found that female leaders rely on bureaucracy rather than effective leadership practices. It's demoralizing for the whole team, but the leaders don't see it. Since female leaders don't want to be perceived as weak, they overcompensate with stubbornness, harshness, and overreaction. It's very difficult to continue being successful in such a system with female leaders, and yet I can't suddenly quit and can't retire yet. You have any advice for dealing with women like this in the workplace? I'd like to hear your insights about navigating these challenges. Thanks for your help. I'm not going to mention his name, and that's it. Well, I mean, I've lost count of the amount of times that I've had conversations with guys like this, more so over the last 5 to 10 years. But I've got a personal story that I can share with you guys that happened when I was still working in the corporate world. We're about to hop on the highway. I've got to sort of ease into it because this parking lot is privately managed and covered in salt, something I should not be driving on after I've cleaned and detailed the car for storage, but such is life. Here we go. These are the things that I do for your guys, all right? So we've got this situation that appears to be a significant issue for many, many guys today when it comes to corporate environments, workplaces, and the such. It's difficult. I get it. I mean, let me share my personal story before I sort of dispense some wisdom here on how to potentially maybe navigate this. When I worked in collections, I think it was around 2000, 2001, there was a particular manager that they added to the team who came from another agency, as they do in the collection world. And, you know, she showed up kind of like a tomboy, tough guy kind of attitude, and she really made her presence known in the first meeting. I was at a manager level, so she was a peer, a colleague, an equivalent to me, if I can put it that way, on the pay grade and the tenure. And I've never seen anybody try to swing as much as this chick did during the first meeting. And that continued into perpetuity in subsequent meetings. It's like, you know, there's this old trope, there's this old notion that smaller guys try to compensate for themselves with, I don't know, big pickup trucks or, you know, pretending that they're bigger than they are. I think they call it the Napoleon complex. It seems like the same sort of thing sort of carries over to females in the workplace. And it's tough. I get it. It's real tough for guys to deal with because most men in an environment, and we always had male managers at that time, they kind of recruited her as they do in that industry because purportedly moving around will give you an opportunity to attract talent, better results, and get better recovery rates on portfolios. So that's why they brought her in. But we never really had a problem with the boys before. It was always, you know, you'd have a meeting, you sit down, you table the topic. This is what the problem is. All right, boys, let's run up the flagpole. Here's a potential solution. Do you like it? Salute it. You don't? Let's bring it back down and put something else back up there that we can sort of deal with. And this is sort of how it went. But as soon as she, you know, was brought into the equation, you notice the conversation in the meeting sort of gets watered down. You have to sort of subdue. You almost have to become less so she can become more. It's that old trope, you know, they talk about in the sexual marketplace where men become more feminized and women become more masculinized. And I don't think that, you know, bringing women into work environments, it's an experiment, if we can put it that way. You know, thousands, millions of years ago, women did not participate in hunts. Women did not participate in wars. They still don't participate in wars today. It's still primarily a male-dominated space when it comes to warfare and combat. There's some administrative roles that are taken on by women these days, but for the most part, it's, men taking on these risks and these dangers. So it's a relatively new phenomenon to have women in an environment where they're trying to compete or work alongside men as peers. I'm going to do that in quote-unquote sort of thing. And this experiment doesn't seem to be working, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like, I got tired of it when I was in the corporate environment, and it's one of the things that I'm thankful that I don't need to sit there and deal with anymore. It's like competing with a gal, or trying to become less, or don't speak over her because she might feel uncomfortable, or your masculinity is toxic or something like that. I've heard versions of that guys have been dealing with for quite a long time now, and if I'm being perfectly honest, it's just a load of crap. It's a load of bullshit. So enter this guy's situation where he's close to retirement. He's only got a few years left. I've heard this notion many times, and it's not just in education, it's in medicine, it's in all sorts of environments where it's mostly a female dominated industry, where they prefer to have a male boss simply because the male boss seems to be more rational. There's less emotional driven conflict. Whereas if you have a principal of a school and it happens to be a male, most women seem to get along with them. Most women teachers, most female teachers, which is what is mostly dominated right now, is mostly women in education, seem to get along well with a male principal. But on the other hand, anytime there's a female type leader in a space like that where it's mostly female dominated, let's say nursing, education, childcare even, there always seems to be some sort of drama. I remember I dated a gal once that was a teacher, and her principal was female. And whenever I saw her, all I heard was story after story about the drama and the nonsense and how I wish, we had a male principal again and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, what are you going to do? Like, what is the answer to that? And you don't really have a lot of options because this is the environment that we've put ourselves in today. Let's bring women into the workforce. They've also done things like they've held back more suitable candidates in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've talked about DEI before on this channel, where they promote people not based on competency skills, but more so on what they were born with in their pants, what color their skin is, disabilities even, things like that. And they'll hold back more competent players to promote those for the optics of DEI satisfaction. If you do government contracts and you solicit bids, before the government will grant you that contract, you have to prove a certain DEI quota is met in your workplace, a visible quota. So a certain number of people of certain colors, maybe natives, women, maybe disabilities, any number of things that can get thrown in the mix, which forces you as an employer to not promote the most competent or the ones with the best skills, but in fact to promote the ones that just meet the hiring quotas, which is absurd. So back to this guy's problem, right? What do you do? He's 9 years away from retirement. He's been a principal, he's been a teacher, he's been a director, he's in charge of 2,000 people, superintendent, blah, blah, blah. And he's got this terror, this nightmare that he seems to be reporting to that turns every molehill into a mountain. And you'll see that, mountains become molehills with the emotional, with the ones that can't regulate their emotions. The only industry that I've seen women generally perform well in a level-headed way when it comes to advancement, for some reason it happens to be law. My ex-wife was a lawyer, and she was always competent and level-headed when it came to decision-making, drafting, and negotiating. There wasn't a lot of emotion that sort of came into the equation. It's kind of fascinating to reflect back and look at it from that stance, but it seems like in any other industry, for some reason, I'm not sure why law doesn't seem to draw it in, these conflicts come up. And you don't have a lot of choices, my friend. I mean, meditate on it. I don't know. Do a hero's triple assignment and sort of reconcile things, for yourself. I don't know. Ask for a transfer to another department. There's really not a lot of tools in the tool chest to remedy a situation like this, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I empathize with you, man. I get exactly where you're coming from, but it is what it is. I mean, the other option, which I'm very enthusiastic about all the time, is entrepreneurship. Is there something that you can lean into that will get you out of this office environment, a side hustle that can become a main hustle that you can utilize to sort of get away from these headaches? Because unless you get a transfer, you retire early, or you look for something else to do, work in another industry, which doesn't make a lot of sense if you got retirement coming in a certain number of years and you're due a pension and a good steady income. Most guys won't walk away from that to just work another 9 years. It's really just a matter of, for most guys, suck it up, buttercup. And it's not just guys, it's women too. I've heard a lot of women complain about working for women bosses, as I spoke about earlier. It's just a matter of finding ways to manage the extra level of distaste, discomfort, emotional nonsense that you're going to have to deal with. Work out, have a good diet. You know what? Join the dojo and start hitting the bag. Take out some frustration on a speed bag, heavy bag, you know, get into boxing. There's really not much you can do aside from what I mentioned earlier. I'd love to hear your guys' comments below. Appreciate you for sponsoring the video. If you guys have a special request you want to make, it's pinned in the top comment. You can go visit that, sponsor video just like this. We'll see you guys soon. Have an awesome day. Peace out.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.